Welcome to the Developing Social Skills module, which is part of the training for Del Mar Center for Behavioral Health. I'm your host for this module, Dr. Becca Tagg. The objectives for this module is to understand the importance of social skill development. We're going to aim to identify common social challenges for individuals with ASD or autism spectrum disorders. We're going to learn how to assess social skills, and we're also going to talk about some strategies that can be helpful in teaching social skills. Social skills can mean a lot of different things to different people, so when we get started, we want to be sure that we're talking about the same thing. So social skills are skills that assist a student or individual in developing social relationships. They're learned behaviors that allow for an individual to interact in ways that results in positive responses from others, and then in gaining positive responses from others, that also means that we are avoiding negative responses. There are lots of different things that make up a social interaction. These are some different examples, right? So the kids in the top left, they're sitting, there's touching, they look like they're going swimming. The kids on the right are maybe huddled up before sports. And then on the bottom, we've got 3 boys coming down the slide. These are all different, they look different, and yet they are all social interactions, right? So if we look back at what are social skills, the skills are the behaviors that a person does to help develop these relationships. They're things that people do that lead to positive interactions with others. So some examples might be taking turns, sharing items, offering or accepting help, conversation skills, listening. Play is a type of skill, so allowing others to play with you, joining in with others, inviting others. Also when to terminate play, right? How do we do that in an appropriate way? And then recognizing facial expressions. Other examples are talking with appropriate volume, expressing your feelings, greeting others, complimenting, taking another person's perspective or viewpoint, asking questions, and responding to questions. So we learned in our ASD intro module that individuals with ASD struggle with social skills, or they struggle with social interactions, usually because there is a deficit of social skills. So they often have trouble interacting with peers, leading to being rejected, and then that leads to withdrawal, isolation, and anxiety. And anger, depression, right? All of those things can come from peer rejection. Individuals with ASD often have a hard time understanding social cues and have a difficulty reading facial expressions and body language. So it's important to know this to help us be more successful in our interactions with individuals with ASD, but also to help us sort of think about the things that we might be wanting to teach individuals with ASD that we might be working with. Social communication issues, there can be poor conversation skills that sometimes it might be one-sided, so they're only talking about Thomas the Train, or they're only talking about planets. But they also may lack knowledge of conversation rules, so taking turns, maybe they're interrupting a lot. Maybe you're looking at your watch, which we know signifies that a person is late or trying to end the conversation, but our individuals with ASD are not likely to pick up on that. It's also possible that their interactions or conversations are more like an interview where we're asking a question and the person with ASD answers, and then we ask another question and then they answer another question. But that's very different than, remember, that reciprocal back and forth volley that comes with natural social conversation. Some other additional difficulties are individuals with ASD may not know what others know, right? So thinking that whatever they know is what the other person knows. This is also called theory of mind, that somebody may be thinking, feeling, or liking something different than theirs. And they may struggle to accurately guess the thoughts, beliefs, and emotional states of another person. A lot of times people ask me, well, Dr. Tag, is it true that students with ASD do not want to interact with other people? And a lot of times that answer is no, that they actually do want to interact, but they don't know how. And so when we don't know how to do something well, or we've tried something and we've gotten hurt or we've been rejected, we then start to avoid whatever it was that led to the negative experience, because we don't want to have negative experiences. So the students do want to interact, and they're not sure how. Social initiation. So initiation is when you start, or the person starts the social interaction. So students with ASD may rarely initiate the social action, or they're initiating, but it's done in an inappropriate way. Imagine a life where social interaction provoked fear and anxiety. How would you feel if asked to speak in public or before a large group? You wouldn't want to do it, right? Because you would be scared or nervous that things weren't going to go well. And so you may begin to avoid any social situation. The thing is that anytime we are interacting with another person, it is a social interaction. So if you think of other situations where a person is likely to interact with another person, it's actually more difficult to think of times when that wouldn't happen, right? So school, they're interacting with other people, walking in the grocery store, riding in the car, meal times with family. All of these are situations where one individual is interacting with another, and there is the possibility for it to not go well. So why do we want to teach social skills? Because many individuals with ASD do not learn social skills through observation, which is the main way that neurotypical individuals learn how to interact with others. They watch and see what others around them are doing, and they see, oh, well, gosh, so-and-so screamed in somebody's face and they got punched, so I don't want to do that because I don't want to get punched. But then they see another individual who says, please, and they're given an extra sweet. And so they say, oh gosh, well, I do want to do that. And so then the child starts saying please and thank you. But our kids on the spectrum do not learn through observation, right? That's part of what we talked about, in that we need to be sure that our kids are paying attention to us, and that sometimes they get lost in the details, but not always the most important details. So it becomes extra important to us to teach it in a way where they will learn what's most important. We want to provide planned opportunities for the child to practice specific behaviors so that we can help with generalization. Remember, in our ASD module, we talked about generalization is something that is difficult for many kids with ASD. And so we want to be purposeful in planning how we're going to teach and how often and in what settings we're going to practice those social skills. And so they must be taught. In order to teach something, we have to know what skills an individual has. We have to know where they are in order to set where we want them to go. So we want to identify the behaviors that will be targeted for intervention, and we want to detail both strengths and weaknesses. A lot of times adults spend so much time talking about what a child can't do that we forget that kids have a lot of strengths as well. And so it's very important to me as a clinician, but also at Del Mar Center for Behavioral Health, that we are focusing on both strengths and weaknesses. We can help a child to use their strengths to compensate for their areas of weakness. We do not need to have a book or a specific rating scale to assess social skills. As a psychologist, there are measures that I use as part of more structured psychological testing. But what I ask you guys to do is really just observe your child in a natural social setting to determine their strengths and needs. This might be, you might observe them at school, you might observe them on a playground, or maybe with peers or with siblings. You want to document things that they do well, but also things that don't go so well. And through that observation, that's a very naturalistic assessment, and we can begin to create a list of expected social skills for the classroom, and then see what our child is able to do. If you're on a home case, you want to create a list of expected social skills for that family and then create a checklist of what we want to target. Same can be true if our child is in an art class or a swimming class. We want to identify from the adult in charge, gosh, what are the necessary social skills that a child must have to be successful in this setting? Then we want to look at what skills does our child already have and what don't they have that we need to target specifically to help them be more successful. So different types of assessments are direct observation that we just talked about. There's self-report, where a child might tell you what they think they're good at or what they need help at. That might be like an interview. We can also get report from their peers, from teachers, from parents. And then there's a super skills profile of social difficulty that we may use in the clinic. Here is an example of the super skills profile of social difficulty. This lists some fundamental skills and some social interaction skills, and then we have parents, and then also maybe you as a behavior technician, what do you see the child currently struggling with? And that can help us identify what their current skill level is, and then we'll want to go just a step up from that as a specific, measurable, and achievable goal. Again, we want to really focus on an individual's strengths. There may be some social strengths that allow us to build new skills through those strengths. So that would be areas 4, 5, and 6 in the super skills profile. See, 4 is somewhat easy, easy, and very easy. So those areas where a child is successful or already has the skills mastered, we want them to experience those interactions so that they can start to have a corrective social interaction. So if social interactions used to be really negative for the child, now we are putting them in situations where they can use these skills and then get positive feedback from their peers or social interaction partners, so interacting with other people no longer feels so terrible. We also have to prioritize each individual's needs, because it is likely that there are a lot of areas that need to be worked on. And so we want to be sure that we are picking the skills that are most critical to the individual. Behavior analysis or applied behavior analysis really emphasizes focusing only on socially significant behaviors. So we want to be focused on the behaviors that will have the greatest impact on the individual's quality of life. We want to build momentum by working on a few skills so that that can be learned quickly so the individual feels successful, right? It's important for us to feel successful if we're going to keep at this thing of learning new skills. And that would be the 0, 1, and 2 skills. So the very difficult, difficult, and somewhat difficult. And again, you won't be expected to do these all on your own. Your supervisor or BCBA that you're working with will be creating the list that we're going to be working on. But it's also important for you, because you're going to be spending so much more time with the child, I find that behavior technicians get so much more rich and robust data and examples because you're with the kids so much more, that when it comes time to create a program, you guys have such a wealth of information. And this is where we want to use team planning. So what skills do we teach? Who will teach what? How will they be taught? And of course, we always want to be determining progress, which in behavior analysis is data. We always want to be making data-based decisions, and so we have to take data to do that. So to evaluate progress, we're going to be doing it periodically. We're going to track skills, either through direct observation, again, interviews, rating scales, super skills profiles. There's lots of different ways to take data. So let's talk about some social skill strategies. Where do we want to teach them? Really, they should be taught in the natural environment wherever possible. Because remember, kids with ASD and adults with ASD have a hard time generalizing skills from one setting to the next or from one person to the next. And so we want to be practicing this in as natural of an environment as possible, because as close to the environment as they'll be expected to perform the task. Social skills instruction should be provided in multiple settings. So maybe it's one-on-one, and then also on the playground, then maybe in the lunchroom, and then maybe we pull a peer in, maybe we pull their sister in and practice social skills, maybe we involve mom. So we're going to teach it in lots of places with lots of people with lots of materials to help with that generalization. So there's no one best place, but actually the answer is kind of everywhere that you're going to be social. And again, being social is anytime you're interacting with another person, so that's kind of everywhere. Some routines that can be helpful in practicing social skills that are common to a lot of our kids: getting on and off the bus, before class starts, after class starts, on lunch breaks, meal times for in-home programs, bath time for in-home programs, just your presence, play dates, in the halls if you're in a school program. Some of our kids participate in clubs or other extracurricular activities. So there's lots of different places where we can practice social skills with our kids. So what can you do as the behavior technician? So you can encourage cooperative games. So our kids may often play by themselves and stack blocks independently, but we can encourage playing a board game together or with peers, or we can encourage turn taking for other maybe races or cooperative motor games outside like soccer or t-ball. We can explain different ways of asking for help. So a lot of times our kids might get frustrated with something that someone else is doing, or frustrated that they aren't being heard or that they don't know how to be heard. And so we want to be sure that our kiddos know how to ask for help. We want to encourage prospective friendships. We want to help our kids identify who might be a good friend and who might not be such a good friend. We'll be running social skills groups, and so we always welcome referrals for those. And then individualized instructional tools, and some of these go back to some of the things we talked about in our Intro to ASD module, where we talked about social stories and power cards. Here's some of those effective instructional tools: the social stories, power cards, comic strip conversations, role playing for our kids who can do that. We have video modeling. We have lots and lots of different ways or tools that we can use to help our kids learn. Social stories are short first-person narratives written for a specific individual or situation. And we already watched the video for Carol Gray's social stories. And so as this is loading, you will see that this is a link to her website. There's the history of social stories, origins, there's social story samples. So this is a great website to check out. Again, it's carolgraysocialstories.com. Social stories can be used to describe social situations that might be difficult for the person. They can teach correct responses in a way that's non-threatening and helps reduce anxiety. When our anxiety is lower, our ability to be successful is greater. It can help make social skills meaningful to the individual and help an individual understand uncertainty, change, or transitions. Those are abstract concepts, and as we talked about, individuals with ASD are more concrete thinkers, so these things can be more difficult to understand and make sense of. Here's an example of a typical social story. It's made up of descriptive, directive, and perspective sentences. So, my name is Eric, and I am in Mrs. Smith's 3rd grade classroom. There are many different types of materials in our classroom. We share the materials. Some of the things we share are crayons, markers, paper, and scissors. When I have something that someone needs, I will finish using it and share it with them, right? So that's the direction. That's what they should do or could do. When I need something that another student is using, I will try to say, "Can I please have that when you're finished?" Again, there's that direction. What are we expecting of them, or what are we trying to teach them? And then the ending says, "The student will be happy that I asked nicely, and Mrs. Smith likes it when her students share the materials." So this is giving the learner or the student or the kiddo insight into how another student and the teacher will think of them, or how they will respond to Eric asking to use something when someone's finished, or using this specific social skill. Here's an example of a poorly written social story. You always go to lunch every day. In the lunchroom, you must sit quietly. You will wait patiently in line, go get your tray, pay for your lunch, and sit like other third graders. If you are too loud or touch other people's food, you will be removed and have to eat in Mrs. Mason's room. Your peers do not like this kind of behavior. You can see the man's face on the bottom. Not only does he not like this behavior, but we don't like this social story, right? And so some of the things we want to avoid is the always word right there in the first sentence. You must sit quietly. Well, for how long, right? And sit like other third graders. What does that mean? Because I bet other third graders, a lot of them look very different. So this is an example of a poorly written social story. Again, a reminder that we have a lot of materials and books in our professional library with Del Mar Center for Behavioral Health. And so if this is something that you're interested in learning more about, I encourage you to reach out and ask to borrow those materials. We always want to be thinking about how to fade our supports, because our goal is for each person to be as independently successful as possible. And that means to reduce any of the supports that we might have in place so that an individual can be independently successful, right? So without any additional support. So we can revise and rewrite the story. We might get rid of the directive sentences, increase the amount of time between review sessions, make it shorter, have less descriptions. So those are all ways to fade a social story. And again, you will not be expected to do this on your own. Your supervisor will be guiding you throughout this process. We also talked about comic strip conversations in our intro to ASD, and it comes up again here. Comic strip conversations are simple drawings that depict a conversation. They emphasize the fact that sometimes we think one thing, but we say something else. Here's another example of comic strip conversations that was created for a situation at school. This website that's loading, the Illinois State Department of Education. Here is a handout that will also be, you'll find this in your materials for this module. So you'll have this that explains more information about comic strip conversations. Power cards, again, we talked about power cards in the ASD module, and here are other examples, right? It has the character of interest or the hero of interest to our student, and then 3 to 5 directions that our hero or the character is reminding our student to learn. Here's an example of the Thomas the Tank Engine story. So Thomas the Tank Engine loves being a helpful and nice engine, but sometimes it's difficult for him to be nice to everyone. At the end of a long day of running the tracks, he is often tired, and it's difficult for him to be nice to his friends. But Thomas has learned it's important to smile at his friends and say nice things to everyone, even when he is tired. He has learned that if he can't say something nice, it is better to smile and say nothing at all. Thomas stops and thinks before he says anything. Just like Thomas, it is important for young people to think before they talk. Thomas is a proud engine when his young friends remember to 1. Think before you say anything. Say it in your head first before you say it out loud. 2. If you can't think of something nice to say, then don't say anything. And 3. You do not have to say every thought you think out loud. And so then the child would probably have a little picture card like this where it has the picture of Thomas instead of Dora, and then it says just like Thomas. Thomas wants me to remember these 3 things, and then it will list the 3 things from this specific story. Role playing can be helpful in teaching kids social skills that they may not have yet mastered. They can be used to teach a variety of social skills and allows for repeated practice. It involves acting out situations or activities in a structured and safe environment. They can be practiced through a written script or spontaneous. Take a moment and think, how did you learn these social skills? Don't talk about blood in a restaurant. Don't give away the ending of a movie. If someone is upset, it might be best to wait to talk about your interests, and don't pick your nose in public. I wonder if, as you're thinking, did you ever have a class or a role play about these things? Or did you kind of just learn them or learn something similar and then were able to generalize to these other skills? These again are some of the things referred to as the hidden curriculum, or the set of unwritten rules that no one has been specifically taught but everyone knows. And violations of these rules in the hidden curriculum can make an individual a social outcast. The hidden curriculum differs across age, who you're with, gender, culture, and individuals with ASD may need to be taught these rules specifically because, again, they're not learning through observation and they're struggling with generalization. These are some of the different tools that we may use to help teach the hidden curriculum. We do have these and updated tools in our professional library in the clinic of Del Mar Center for Behavioral Health, so you can always check those out if this is an area you'd like to learn more. Peers play a really important role in social development. So peer-to-peer support. This is something that we do a lot in the schools and in the clinic. So if you're involved in cases that are either clinic-based or school-based, or even part of our social skills groups. So we have neurotypical peers that are trained and taught specifically to make social interactions with the individual with ASD. In identifying a peer, it should be a peer with good social skills of their own. And then peer mentors allow us to serve as facilitators rather than playmates, which is one of the challenges when we do in-home programs if there's not a sibling, right? Because we are the ones that are playing with the child, and yet we are adults and we are not playmates. Peer mentors promote generalization of skills across environments. Another tips, we can encourage the use of my turn, your turn cards. We can use social rule cards, which might be an index card with some different rules written on them that can help prompt a child to remember what the social rules are or what part of the hidden curriculum is relevant to the specific setting they're in. We might develop and use social scripts, and then teach specific play skills that can help the child focus on their interactions while they're playing with peers because they know how to play. Here's an example of a my turn, your turn social card. Here's an example of a social rule card. At school, we walk together at a class. We walk to the playground, we walk to lunch, we walk to gym, and we walk to the library. Here's an example of a social script. So when I want to ask a friend to play, I can first stand close to them. I can say their name and ask, "Can I play with you?" And then I can wait for them to look at me and respond. So you can see there's visuals both in pictures or images as well as the written language. Your role is so important in teaching social skills to our kids. We want to facilitate, not debilitate. And this really refers to the idea that we want to help our kids be successful, but we don't always want to give them all of the answers. So we want to give them a chance to do it independently before we decide to prompt the child or to use a cue card or some other support. Debilitate really means keeping them from strengthening their skills. And you'll probably hear me say a million times that our job is to work ourselves out of a job. We should be working to help each individual and each family to be as independently successful as possible, that they don't need our help and support. Proximity control is one way that we can facilitate or debilitate, right? And so close proximity means really being closer to the child. We could touch them, actually have physical contact, but we also could be directly next to the student. The student might be sitting in the adult's lap. Maybe we go with the student different places in the building. All of these are different ways that we can use physical proximity to either help facilitate interaction, but again, if we're using it too much, and not too much proximity, but we're being too close too often, we can actually be debilitating or hindering their progress. And here's kind of that in summary, which is when we are super close or close proximity all the time, that can create an over-dependence on adult. So we want to reduce the number and quality, or that can reduce the number and quality of peer interaction. So peers might start to interact with you instead of the student, or the sibling will interact with you instead of their child. And then that is a sense, there's a loss of personal control for the student. We also want to be mindful of bullying, because our kids or any child with a disability is significantly more likely to be bullied than a child without a disability. Some of our kids may not have strong vocal verbal speech or even an understanding of what bullying is, and so we want to look for other behavioral signs that bullying might be happening. So it can be a loss of appetite, stomach aches, headaches, their grades might suffer, maybe they start not wanting to go to school, there can be nightmares or sleep disturbances, which can also be oversleeping or sleeping a lot more than usual. Kids may withdraw, you may notice a lack of confidence, they might be engaging in risky behaviors like bullying others or increasing a use of physical violence to get their needs met. And we also might see signs of depression, anxiety, fear, anger, and despair. And we love our kids with ASD, right? And yet they are also perfect targets, in quotes. And that's often because they are frustrating to others. They might be rejected by peers. They might be clumsy, have challenges with what other kids are able to do socially, are emotionally vulnerable, are anxious or easily stressed, inflexible, socially naive, and that all makes them easy targets. Because a bully bullies in order to either get a response from the person they're bullying or to get a reaction from the other people around them or to gain access to an item. And so our kids are easy targets. So again, we talked about being aware of the signs of bullying. What do you do if you notice that your child is being bullied or a parent tells you, I think so-and-so is being bullied at school? First, you want to let your supervisor know, or if you're on a school case, you definitely want to let the teacher know and also let your supervisor know. With your supervisor's support, you want to get the perspective of the individual being bullied, so that's your child or your student. You want to discuss the need to share with administration or counselors. So again, calling in your tribe to help support you and your student. We want to prevent and prepare for retaliation. Monitor the student for worsening depression. Seek a person to mediate between parties if appropriate. And assess any social skill challenges that could trigger future bullying. And then we're going to want to target those as areas of growth. So in summary, excellent RBTs are going to recognize how valuable you are in the student's education. And education not just in the school setting, but education when we're talking about social skills occurs anytime the child is interacting with others. So at home with family, in the clinic with other kids, at football practice with peers. Technicians are going to understand how to step back and fade support when the time is right. Technicians are going to play a meaningful role in social skills development. You're going to watch for opportunities to support peer interaction and play, as well as keep a watchful eye for bullying. And have fun. We want to create a corrective experience for our kids with ASD who may have had negative social interactions before, and based on that, they may withdraw from social interactions currently. So review questions. Why is it important to teach social skills? What are some common social challenges that students with ASD may have? How can you assess your child's social skill level? How can you use peers to teach social skills? And what is one tool or strategy you can use to teach social skills? As you're preparing your review and doing some last-minute studying before you take the content quiz for this module, these are some of the questions you want to think about as you're preparing to be tested, as well as things to think about during your sessions with your child with ASD. Congratulations on finishing this next module. You want to contact your supervisor and let them know that you are ready to take the content quiz for the social skills module.